Alright, let's get real. What actually happened to SpongeBob SquarePants? Its golden age of a universally loved cartoon has faded away to an almost unrecognizable show to many of its original fans, depending on how you look at it. Why is that? For all of us, SpongeBob was more than quirky fun. It had these heartfelt messages woven into all that silliness. But it has slowly turned into something else entirely, filled with louder gags, simpler plots, and divisive spin-offs. Was it due to network pressures to keep SpongeBob profitable? Or did Nickelodeon's influence water down the show, prioritizing merchandise over quality? Today, SpongeBob is still here, but feels like a distant memory of what it once was. And to truly understand what happened, we need to start from the beginning. Believe it or not, SpongeBob SquarePants wasn't born in a traditional TV writer's room, but rather in the mind of a marine biologist. Before creating the show, Steven Hillenburg was knee-deep in tide pools as a marine biology teacher at the Ocean Institute in Dana Point, California. Fascinated by the sea and the creatures within it, Hillenburg wanted a way to bring the ocean to life for others. The wacky world we know as Bikini Bottom actually started as a simple underwater sketch. Hillenburg had this idea for a comic book called The Intertidal Zone to get his students more engaged with marine life. From that, he created these goofy underwater characters, which later evolved into the world of SpongeBob we all know today. And look at the show now. I'm here telling you a whole essay about it. I hear you wondering, why a sponge? What's the logic there? Hillenburg initially considered making the main character an inanimate object, and a sponge seemed odd enough to be funny and relatable. It had the simplicity of shape and color he needed, and unlike many of the other marine animals he drew, a sponge had this bizarre flexibility that allowed for almost any kind of story or personality. When it came to personality, though, Hillenburg was inspired by classic comedy. While talking about the inspiration behind the character, Hillenburg said, "I think SpongeBob was born out of my love of Laurel and Hardy shorts. You've got that kind of idiot buddy situation. That was a huge influence. SpongeBob was inspired by that kind of character. The innocent, a la Stan Laurel. And I think we can all agree that he totally nailed it, right?" He wanted SpongeBob to be a one-of-a-kind character, someone who was pure, naive, and driven by curiosity rather than common sense. And in my opinion, that's part of why he's so entertaining to watch. The unique choice of setting for SpongeBob's world also has an interesting origin. Bikini Bottom is inspired by Bikini Atoll, a real location in the Pacific Ocean known for its atomic bomb tests during the mid-20th century. Hillenburg playfully incorporated this name, adding an almost ironic twist to the show's setting. SpongeBob may be a lighthearted slapstick comedy, but if you pay close attention, you'll notice it subtly weaves in a darker undertone. There are plenty of these hidden layers to dig into, and I'll get back to that later in the video. Now, SpongeBob didn't just stay in Hillenburg's sketchbook for long. When he transitioned from the Ocean Institute to animation, Hillenburg brought his beloved Sponge character with him. After working on Rocko's Modern Life, a popular Nickelodeon show, Hillenburg saw an opportunity to pitch SpongeBob as a full-blown animated series. He had the concept art, the sketches, and the storyline already mapped out. Nickelodeon executives were skeptical at first. A sea sponge? Really? But Hillenburg's pitch was compelling. He convinced them that SpongeBob's unique blend of slapstick humor, quirky innocence, and eccentric cast of characters could work. And with that, SpongeBob SquarePants went from a marine biologist's passion project to one of the most recognizable faces in television history. What's fascinating is how, from the very start, the show was made to be enjoyed by kids and adults alike. Hillenburg was passionate about the idea that animation should be boundary-pushing, not limited to specific age groups. He wanted SpongeBob to be something of a cartoon everyman, silly but resilient, foolish but oddly relatable, and this blend of childlike wonder with oddball humor proved to be exactly what audiences were looking for. And that was only the beginning. Once SpongeBob hit the airwaves, things started to take off in ways no one anticipated. But how did a sea sponge become a cultural phenomenon? Well, when SpongeBob SquarePants premiered on May 1st, 1999, it hit audiences with a quirky, vibrant energy that was unlike anything on TV at the time. Nickelodeon had stumbled upon something special. Within months, SpongeBob was everywhere. Kids loved his goofy charm, parents enjoyed the clever humor, and teenagers quickly adopted the show as a cult favorite. SpongeBob became an icon. But what was it about this show that captured so many hearts? SpongeBob's rise to fame happened at the intersection of a few unique cultural factors. At the time, Nickelodeon was in a golden era itself. The network was pushing the boundaries of kids' TV with shows like Hey Arnold and The Fairly Odd Parents. And SpongeBob stood out, partly because it didn't seem aimed only at kids. Its humor was layered, often absurd, and filled with references that even adults found hilarious. Think about it. We witnessed SpongeBob's optimism, Squidward's sarcastic misery, and Patrick's well-meaning idiocy. Each character represented a different side of the human experience. The result was a show that was innocent but never overly sweet, bizarre but weirdly relatable. As the show grew in popularity, SpongeBob became a cultural touchstone. From memes to merchandise, it seeped into every aspect of pop culture. There were wild fan theories, even in these early days, ranging from the Patrick CIA theory to the Squilliam imposter theory. You can watch my videos on these theories through the description below. One popular theory suggests that each of the characters in Bikini Bottom represents one of the 7 deadly sins. If you haven't heard about this theory, let me give you a little background. SpongeBob embodies lust with his relentless enthusiasm and obsessive passion for life. Patrick represents sloth, rarely doing much of anything. Squidward channels wrath with his constant frustration and anger. The theory goes on to attribute pride to Sandy, greed to Mr. Krabs, gluttony to Gary, and envy to Plankton. I know it's wild, but it also makes you wonder if there's some truth in the madness. Hillenburg always had a knack for hiding layers of meaning, even in seemingly silly characters. But it wasn't just the fans who fueled SpongeBob's success. The writers and animators were on fire during these early seasons. Each episode was crafted with a sense of experimentation and freedom, and it shows. Scenes like SpongeBob's ridiculous karate skills with Sandy, or Patrick's famous "Is mayonnaise an instrument?" line,
"Is mayonnaise an instrument?"
No, Patrick, mayonnaise is not an instrument,
became instant classics. This was the golden age, roughly the first 3 seasons, when the show felt innovative and fresh. Fans were hooked, and Nickelodeon couldn't get enough of their Sponge superstar. Then came the SpongeBob SquarePants movie in 2004, a moment many fans consider the pinnacle of the franchise. The film felt like a love letter to the characters and fans alike. It brought in elements that were bigger, bolder, and somehow even more absurd than the series. SpongeBob, Patrick, and even Plankton were given heroic arcs, and the stakes were raised in a way that hadn't been done before. Some fans even believe the movie was intended as the show's grand finale, partly because Steve Hillenburg himself was ready to step away. He had been closely involved, and after the film's release, he handed over the day-to-day reins of the series to other producers. For me, this marked the end of SpongeBob's golden age. After the success of the movie, something shifted in Bikini Bottom. Since Hillenburg was no longer there to supervise the show, its tone and style began to change. Honestly, I started noticing a shift as early as season 4. For me and countless other fans, things started to feel different. Episodes were becoming more chaotic, character dynamics skewed, but am I the only one who picked up on this? Does this sound familiar to you? SpongeBob, once a lovable optimist, started veering into hyperactive child territory. Squidward's cynicism turned from a relatable frustration to outright misery, and Patrick's goofiness drifted toward oblivious cruelty. It was as if each character had been dialed up to a caricature, a trend that didn't sit well with longtime fans. Meanwhile, episodes became increasingly surreal. They were relying on twisted, exaggerated humor and visual gags that felt almost disturbing compared to earlier seasons. Gone were the clever gags and subtle jokes. In their place were slapstick scenes that often bordered on uncomfortable. For instance, in later episodes, we started seeing characters suffer injuries or behave in ways that felt mean-spirited rather than funny. This was when I really started to feel like the show had lost its spark. And then things got even worse. Season 6 rolled around, and this era is often seen as a real low point in SpongeBob's history. Episodes like The Splinter and A Pal for Gary weren't just dark, they felt unsettling, with narratives that seemed more mean-spirited than funny. What was going on here? Instead of simple, humorous conflicts, these episodes featured twisted visuals and intense scenarios that felt far from the lighthearted spirit of the earlier seasons. This period of unsettling episodes only added fuel to the fire, sparking another fan theory. But as they say, each disadvantage has its advantage, right? Anyway, this theory goes that the creators were intentionally turning SpongeBob into a satire of itself. According to this theory, the later episodes were kind of a social experiment, testing how much audiences could tolerate before finally tuning out. It's a dark take, but the fact that it even exists shows just how deeply fans feel about the show. And these changes sparked speculations that the character's evolution reflects the Flanderization phenomenon, a term referring to how characters in long-running series become exaggerated versions of themselves over time. Critics weren't blind to this shift either. Once hailed as a groundbreaking series, SpongeBob became the subject of growing criticism. Some pointed fingers at Nickelodeon's decision to keep the show running despite Hillenburg's departure, suggesting that without his guidance, SpongeBob SquarePants had lost its way. By 2005, SpongeBob SquarePants was no longer the quirky, experimental show that captured the hearts of both kids and adults. Nickelodeon had taken note of its massive success and began to make intentional shifts, hoping to keep the momentum going, but with a different target in mind. Nickelodeon started leaning into content that catered almost exclusively to younger viewers, resulting in simpler jokes, more exaggerated expressions, and repetitive plots. The earlier seasons had a unique knack for layering humor, appealing to multiple age groups with clever wordplay and subtle nods to adult concerns. But now, the humor became broader and the storylines were less nuanced. Old SpongeBob, characters were more relatable and had clear motivations. SpongeBob was depicted as innocent and optimistic, and his friendships with characters like Patrick and Sandy were central to the stories. New SpongeBob, while the core characters remain, their personalities have become more exaggerated. SpongeBob is often portrayed as more naive and childlike, and other characters like Squidward have become more cynical and less nuanced. Episodes often leaned on visual gags rather than witty exchanges or thoughtful scenarios. Longtime fans noticed the shift and began to feel that the show was becoming a bit, younger. Rather than the layered appeal of classic SpongeBob, episodes began to play things safe and straightforward, focusing on bright visuals and easy-to-grasp punchlines that didn't require a second thought. A new trend was creeping in: gross-out humor and these unexpectedly dark themes. For example, if you remember A Pal for Gary, you know that SpongeBob introduced a friend for Gary who ended up terrorizing him, while SpongeBob was totally oblivious to his pet's suffering. I mean, who even came up with this idea? And don't even get me started on one-course meal. Mr. Krabs goes so far as to torment Plankton, preying on his deepest fears in a way that even suggests suicidal thoughts? Like, who would do that? Who goes that far? These storylines felt mean-spirited and misguided, and obviously, the controversial episodes left fans convinced that SpongeBob had lost its way. As the show's tone shifted, fans began to speculate about Nickelodeon's influence on its content. A popular theory emerged suggesting that SpongeBob SquarePants has become increasingly commercialized, with Nickelodeon pushing for more merchandise-friendly content and episodes that would fit into a marketable mold. This theory holds that Nickelodeon's executives had effectively turned SpongeBob into a cash cow, focusing on formulaic episodes that would churn out toys, apparel, and other merchandise. Episodes were allegedly toned down or simplified not for artistic reasons, but to appeal to younger, merchandise-buying audiences and keep SpongeBob's brand strong and profitable. Many fans believe this commercial focus compromised the integrity of the show, transforming it from a unique piece of animation into a vehicle for mass-market appeal. Despite these changes, the internet played a surprising role in keeping SpongeBob relevant, breathing new life into the series through memes. Fans took moments from both the classic and newer episodes, pulling out scenes and expressions that lent themselves perfectly to internet humor. Who could forget the mocking SpongeBob meme or handsome Squidward? Even episodes that fans weren't necessarily fond of had segments that became wildly popular online. This constant stream of SpongeBob-themed memes made the character and his friends staples of internet culture. In a nutshell, the memes derived from declining seasons kept SpongeBob alive in the digital sphere, and then the 2010s brought some attempts to recapture the magic. I mean, fans were vocal about the declining quality of the show, so Nickelodeon took note and attempted to rekindle the spark. One of the biggest comeback moves came with the return of Steven Hillenburg in 2014. Personally, I felt that his influence could revive the heart and humor that defined the show's early years. Under his direction, some episodes took on a fresher feel. In 2015, we watched the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, which brought SpongeBob and his friends into the 3D realm and aimed to reach both nostalgic fans and new audiences. Obviously, the movie was a great success. In fact, it became the second highest grossing film based on an animated television show behind the Simpsons movie released in 2007. Unfortunately, Hillenburg's comeback was tragically cut short when he passed away in 2018. Now, the modern SpongeBob fanbase is now divided, with opinions ranging from loyalty to disillusionment. Some fans continue to find joy in the show's evolution, enjoying the new content and supporting the spin-offs as a way of keeping SpongeBob's legacy alive for new generations. Others feel that the show has drifted too far from what made it special. To these fans, the newer episodes lack the magic of Hillenburg's original vision and feel like a distant echo of the show they once loved. Now, there is this theory that suggests SpongeBob's decline mirrors broader trends in children's television, where shows have become faster-paced and more visually overstimulating to compete with other digital entertainment. In today's world of social media and instant gratification, shows have had to evolve, using rapid pacing and high-energy antics to keep viewers hooked. So, SpongeBob's transformation isn't just about the show, it's about an entire industry scrambling to stay relevant in the TikTok era. And don't get me wrong, they're doing their best, but it's a far cry from those slower, more thoughtful episodes we loved. Ultimately, SpongeBob SquarePants has had an incredible journey, and I believe that the show's evolution reflects a mix of artistic choices, executive decisions, and changing audience preferences. So, after all these ups and downs, where does SpongeBob SquarePants really stand in TV history? Are you a fan of the newer episodes and spin-offs, or do you stick to the classics? And what do you think about the theories that SpongeBob's shift reflects larger trends in kids' programming? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, take care and stay tuned.